Imagine this, you look up at the night sky, and instead of a silent black emptiness filled with stars, you see a glowing, hazy ocean of air stretching endlessly in every direction. Space, but with atmosphere. What if space was filled with air? Could we finally take off our spacesuits and float around like swimmers in a cosmic ocean? Would Earth become a paradise of easy space travel? Or would the entire universe collapse into chaos within seconds? Well, let's find out. First, let's define what we mean. Right now, space is a vacuum, essentially nothing. That's why rockets work, why satellites orbit smoothly, and why astronauts wear bulky suits. But what if we suddenly filled all of outer space, from Earth's orbit to the farthest galaxies, with the same kind of air we breathe? On Earth, air is made mostly of nitrogen, oxygen, and small amounts of carbon dioxide. At sea level, the pressure is 1 atmosphere, the perfect balance for human lungs. But in space, there's nothing to contain the air. No walls, no ceiling, no atmosphere. So here's problem number 1. Air is heavy, really heavy. If you tried to fill space with air at Earth's pressure, the sheer mass of all that gas would be incomprehensible. Just 1 cubic kilometer of air weighs about 1.2 billion kilograms. Now multiply that by the unimaginable volume of space between galaxies. The amount of mass added would instantly collapse the universe under its own weight. Gravity would pull everything inward into one massive black hole. So sorry, if we filled all of space with air, the universe wouldn't last more than a second. But let's imagine a softer version. Instead of filling the entire universe, let's just fill the solar system with breathable air. Now things get weird. At first, it might sound amazing. Astronauts could float out of the International Space Station without helmets. You could fly to the moon with just a jetpack. Every planet would be connected by an ocean of atmosphere. But air isn't just invisible, it has drag. On Earth, drag is what makes skydivers slow down or cars burn fuel. In space, with air everywhere, satellites and space stations would suddenly face resistance. Every orbiting object would spiral downward as drag sucked away their momentum. Within hours, all satellites, including GPS, communication, and weather systems, would fall to Earth. The ISS? Gone. Starlink? Gone. Even the moon would start losing orbital energy, inching closer until it eventually collided with Earth. So much for easy space travel. And it gets worse. With air in space, the sun's radiation would scatter differently. Right now, space is black because photons travel unimpeded. But with air, sunlight would scatter just like it does in Earth's atmosphere. This means no starry night skies, just a constant bright haze. Even at midnight, the entire sky would glow like daylight. The Milky Way, invisible. The stars, hidden forever. And speaking of the sun, with atmosphere in space, heat would travel differently. Normally in a vacuum, there's nothing to carry heat away. But in air, heat spreads quickly. This means the entire solar system would warm up unevenly. Planets might become too hot to live on, while deep space regions would grow unstable. The delicate balance of planetary climates would collapse. And then there's sound. Right now, space is silent because there's no medium to carry vibrations. But if space had air, sound could travel across the cosmos, which means supernovas exploding would be audible across light years. Imagine a deafening roar echoing through space as stars die. Or the constant hum of planets moving, meteors burning, and galaxies colliding. Space would no longer be silent and beautiful. It would be noisy, terrifyingly noisy. And then comes the deadliest twist. Pressure. Air at Earth's density would crush everything in space. The higher you go in Earth's atmosphere, the thinner the air gets, until it fades into nothing. But if space were filled with constant, Earth-like air, there would be no thin region. The pressure would stay the same forever. On Earth's surface, that's fine. But in orbit, spacecraft are designed for vacuum, not atmospheric drag and pressure. Every satellite would shatter under the new load. Spacesuits would burst like balloons. Rockets wouldn't even launch properly, because rockets are built to push against nothing. In short, humanity's space age would end overnight. But let's not stop here. What about planets? What would happen to Mars, Jupiter, or Pluto if they were suddenly submerged in a cosmic ocean of air? That's where things get really strange. So far, we've seen that satellites would crash, Stars would vanish behind a constant haze, and the entire universe would suddenly become deafening. But what about the planets themselves? Take Mars, for example. Right now, Mars has a very thin atmosphere, less than 1% of Earth's. That's why liquid water can't last long on its surface. If space were suddenly filled with Earth-like air, Mars would instantly get a thick blanket of atmosphere. At first glance, this sounds amazing. Mars would finally be habitable. Water could stay liquid, the sky would turn blue, and you might even breathe without a suit. But here's the catch. Without a global magnetic field, Mars can't hold onto atmosphere for long. Solar winds would slowly strip the air away, just like they do now. Instead of becoming a paradise, Mars would just turn into a giant sandstorm factory. Now let's go bigger. Jupiter and Saturn. Gas giants already have thick atmospheres, but suddenly immersing them in an even greater sea of air would cause chaos. Their storms, already massive like Jupiter's Great Red Spot, which is bigger than Earth, would become even more violent as they interacted with the external air. Imagine planetary hurricanes on a scale so enormous that they could be heard across the solar system. And then there's Pluto. Right now, it's an icy dwarf planet with a wisp of atmosphere. With space filled with air, Pluto would develop constant wind and weather. But here's the terrifying part. At its low temperatures, the oxygen and nitrogen in the cosmic atmosphere would freeze and snow down. That means Pluto would be buried under endless blizzards of frozen air, a planet entombed in its own new sky. But this doesn't just affect planets. Stars would suffer too. Stars like our sun produce solar winds, streams of charged particles that flow outward at incredible speeds. In the vacuum of space, these winds spread freely. But in an ocean of air, they'd collide with molecules everywhere, creating shockwaves and turbulence. The sun would essentially be blowing a cosmic storm across the solar system at all times. And black holes? Normally, they feed on matter that falls too close. But with air everywhere, black holes would constantly swallow gas, growing faster and faster. Some would balloon into gigantic monsters, devouring whole star systems at record speed. The universe would become dotted with hyperactive black holes, pulling in everything around them. Now let's zoom out to the galaxy scale. Air filling space would scatter light, meaning galaxies billions of light years away would vanish from view. Astronomy would be impossible. Our entire understanding of the universe would collapse, because we'd be trapped inside a glowing fog. And then, gravity steps in again. Remember how heavy air is? If you filled the Milky Way alone with air, it would add trillions upon trillions of tons of mass. Over time, this mass would fall toward galactic centers, fueling black holes and causing galaxies to collapse in on themselves. Instead of a vast, stable universe, we'd get one giant implosion. But let's come back to Earth. What would it feel like to live in a universe with space filled with air? First, the night sky would never be dark again. Forget about stargazing. The sky would glow with scattered light 24/7. Second, meteors would never reach the ground because they'd burn up long before impact, thanks to the constant friction of atmosphere. That might actually save us from asteroid strikes, but at the cost of losing satellites, rockets, and space exploration entirely. And speaking of rockets, they wouldn't work anymore. Rockets are designed to thrust against a vacuum. If there's drag everywhere, reaching orbit becomes nearly impossible. Humanity would be stuck on Earth with no way out. Even stranger, because sound travels through air, you'd hear cosmic events. A nearby supernova could literally deafen the solar system. Earth would constantly vibrate with the low rumble of planetary movements, stellar winds, and galactic storms. It wouldn't be the beautiful silence of space. It would be endless, chaotic noise. So what's the bottom line? Filling space with air sounds like a fun idea, finally being able to breathe among the stars. But the reality would be a nightmare. Satellites crashing, planets destabilizing, black holes feeding like monsters, galaxies collapsing, and a sky that's forever hazy and loud. The universe as it is now may be cold and empty, but it works. And if it were full of air, well, let's just say it wouldn't be the universe at all. It would be a suffocating, collapsing disaster. Sometimes, nothing is better than something.